What's up, everybody? Gulz here with another Team Turbo Blaze video. We're doing a deck deep dive for R.D.T today. I'm here joined with Logan, Chucky, and Evan. Super excited to have the squad here. And before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsor. It's going to be Collectors Connection. And you can go check them out online at collectorsconnectionduluth.com for all of their daily events. So today we are going to be going over the deck that I just won the full grip 3K with, R.D.T, which stands for Rock, Dogi, Ting-Lu. I gotta be honest with you guys, I'm really proud of this one. This is a cool deck. Today we're going to start by just kind of going over how the deck came to be. And before we do that, I just want to give flowers to our boy Mickey. Big shout out to Mickey. If y'all are online, y'all know Mickey. He's the GOAT. And we just want to thank him for just like giving our, just opening our eyes to how good Ting-Lu can be. And with his Vessel of Ruins deck, just wanted to give him a shout out. Big flowers to Mickey there. So let's get started into this deck rundown. And we're going to start off with how the deck came to be. To start off, we got an announcement. Pokemon released Lunatone. And I can't remember the exact month or whenever that was. But whenever they did show us a Lunatone that had a basic draw, it was crazy. We were losing our mind in the chat and immediately went to brewing. The first deck that we started off with was for sure pretty close to where we ended. There's going to be a big piece that changed, but the overall core of the deck stayed the same. But yeah, so how the deck came to be was the release of that Lunatone. And everybody always says, if Fighting gets a draw engine, it's going to be broken. Guess what? We got a draw engine. So we went to work immediately. Myself, Logan, and Chucky started really grinding this R.D.T list. And the initial list did start off with the kind of core Pokemon that you see in the list that we have today. The main difference being that we were really pushing the Medicham. Medicham has a trait that lets it attack twice. And we all believed initially that that was a absolutely broken thing to have in Fighting. And now that we had a draw engine to make that like happen, we just started putting all of our attention into it. So that was the first kind of like thought with the deck. Evan, what did you think about the deck when we initially had sent our first proposal for it?
I mean, I was excited, like especially with the recent addition of the ignition energy as like another way to be able to power up the Medicham in such a like fast motion between things like Colress Tenacity and Guzma Hala Tag Team, just being able to search out like say Blindside and being able to just put say Hawlucha down or Ting-Lu first to get those damage counters out, and then start swinging on bench for multiple knockouts per turn, while also being able to set up other attackers as you go. I mean, early on we didn't know about the new Solrock. We didn't have that info, so we were like testing out like the Solrock that removed resistance, and like seeing how that would help with like the psychic matchup. And there was a lot of where we almost had all the parts for Metacham, like how testing would pan out, we'd be like 1 card short for any given combo. So there was something left to be desired there in the consistency aspect, even though we did get that draw support. Even though the deck like felt like we always had like 11, 12 cards in hand, it didn't seem quite feasible for what we were hoping for in a deck that we're trying to bring to a large event like the Full Grip 3K.
And to kind of jump into the it's not just the Lunatone that we had received at that time, because I think the Lunatone gets spoiled. I think it was actually a spoiler because of the promo cards, but then within 24 hours we got a release of cards. We still didn't have the Solrock, but we had other cards for fighting, and fighting got a huge boost from this set, namely Fighting Gong, which is effectively Fog Crystal for fighting, as well as Premium Power Pro, which is Electro Power, giving a 30 damage buff to fighting Pokemon. I want to call it now. I named it Fight Milk. That was all me, so it's my credit for everything that happened. Yes,
Fight
drink
Milk.
Fight Milk. So that said, though, those cards added substantial boosts, and to be fair, the Fight Milk we weren't as sold on yet, but definitely the Fight Gong was huge, because again, it's just another consistency piece to help fighting set up, because now we're in a spot where we need to have multiple Pokemon set up on the bench as quickly as possible to have a draw engine. So I think there were a couple of different versions of the deck originally, and I know for myself, I focused on high consistency. I was playing cards like Battle VIP Pass, Gloria, really wanted to see for the theory of how often can we set up, and even without the Metacham, what was realized was this is broken. If I just set on Dog or Ting-Lu, there's 2 angles of attack that are very hard to answer. Bloodmoon's very hard to answer. We had all the pieces in front of us, but the one thing that was kind of a hang-up at first was trying to figure out how to make the Metacham be this piece to finish games. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and ultimately that led us to kind of the next phase of deck building.
Yeah, and with the Metacham specifically, it felt like Evan said, we were always just a piece or two short in the end game. Now, I would go on to say this later on in testing several times over, because I think that we landed on a list that was somewhere between 5-6 cards from where we were at originally. And this is even taking out an entire Metacham package, right? Like Ghouls had said, it's not just Metacham. Whenever we were initially on this technology, it was Metacham, TM Blindside, TM Devolution, and then, of course, the double energy. So that's a 5-card package, right? Well, we landed on something that was about 5 cards different than that original list. So the guts stayed true throughout. And, the thing that I said many times in testing was, guys, it feels like the most busted version of this list was the very first one that we built. We would go through many iterations over the course of the next couple of weeks and month, and it always just felt like if we're going to be using Ting-Lu as a strategy, and we're going to be using these cards, building it as low to the ground and as consistent as we can build it seems like the way to go. We messed around with a bunch of additional attackers. Ghouls is going to bring some of those up in just a second, but the Metacham being the crux to try to finish games was, again, really cool when it happened. Something that we just weren't able to pull off as consistent as we liked. And especially in a format where we expected a lot of bench barrier to be present. We knew that we were playing the cards to be able to deal with it at certain times. But again, that's just additional pieces that you would need with Metacham to close out. And so it just made us a little bit more sketched out by playing that card in general as to where we landed on with, the end product.
Yeah, and just one last thing about the Metacham, for me, I looked at it as the answer to falling behind. I thought it was a chance to not only push advantage with something like Blindside, because like a Hawlucha with with Blindside and Metacham is a easy 2 prizes, and the spread of Ting-Lu Devo with Metacham just makes it to where you have to essentially Ting-Lu twice on a full board. And so like the theory of Metacham was just so appealing to me. Like I just to make it work so bad. But like what the guys were saying is we would build these massive hands, but it would get disrupted, and then you would end up just like missing like one piece. Because the problem with the Metacham was that none of the pieces could be like pre-attached. Like they all just like disappear, at the end of the turn. So we tried to make that as consistent as possible as well, running Town Store, Crisis Punch, both Ignition Energy and Triple Excel. We went back and forth on just one Triple Energy or both. But like everybody's saying, it just got to the point where we felt like if we could just set up consistently, then we were winning those games. And there wasn't any need to necessarily go there. But the Metacham, the funniest story about the Metacham, to be super transparent about this with everybody, I had bought a Best of XY Metacham. So like it was pretty expensive. Like it was like $20 for a Metacham, because I was so set in stone. I was like, this is who I am. I am Metacham. This is my personality, and I'm gonna break this card. So I had to get like the highest rarity, right? Well, all my cards like start coming in that I had ordered, except the Metacham. And I'm like, what is going on with this? And I look and I go to eBay to go buy like another card or something. And lo and behold, my cart has an item in it whenever I pull up eBay. And it's the Metacham Best of XY. And I had never ordered it. So at that point, I took that as a sign that I was not supposed to be playing Metacham and to call it a day. That was the only thing that got through my thick skull on that one. But another card to talk about like how hard-headed I was would be Lucario. So like the journey of Lucario coming into the deck is also a interesting topic. Initially, I did not want to play Lucario because it was another evolution. Y'all know I hate evolutions. I don't really hate them, but I think they're not the best option a lot of times when it comes to the game right now. So I did not want to play Lucario. But unfortunately, Justice, who couldn't be here tonight, was the like ultimate Lucario stan. Like completely just, I'm playing Lucario, this card is nuts, you guys need to get with it. This card is insane. Through testing, we saw that. We saw the Lucario hit the numbers that the deck needed to hit. And the ability to do so through not a lot of resource commitment, which was huge. We'll talk about the math like throughout the video, but 150 for one is huge. Like that is such a very important number on top of not being able to be copycatted back. It has the whole wording of if one of your fighting Pokemon are knocked out. And so that just like shuts Mimikyu out of the conversation, which is really cool. So yeah, I know that everybody probably picked up Lucario before I did. So what was your experience, Evan?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, one energy attach is like a very, very fast way to take a revenge KO. It's pretty good, especially with the like available buffs in the deck. Like you can be hitting 180, you can be hitting 210. Like you can get there pretty easily. And I have a slightly different view on the deck because Chucky and I were running a slightly different list for the event. But yeah, I mean, one energy. How do you go wrong with that? It's even if you don't get into the Lucario right away, just setting up the Riolu and having it chill there, single retreat, easy pivot. I enjoy it. I think it's great. I'm glad we ended up on that card. It's a lot of damage for very, very little work.
Yeah, I think the most important thing too is that the basis of this deck is to attack from multiple angles, but sometimes to set up those phases, you have to have some type of pivot or buffer. And Lucario is a perfect buffer while still putting pressure on the prize race. I think that's the most important thing that it does, in addition to the fact that it's very efficient, because we can't afford to have too many 2-energy attackers. And it serves that role, and it's perfect for that role. If it were any less damage, or it needed additional energy, or it's a stage 2, or like there's so many factors on how it could easily be cut out, but because of it meets exact checkboxes that no other card or evolution meets in fighting, it's the ideal card.
Yeah, and it was a card that once you drop, like Evan said, once you drop the Riolu, it started asking questions of your opponent. And that's kind of the way that we build decks. A very big strategy that we have is, we want to come off the bus asking questions, right? So as soon as you are attacking with one of your fighting Pokemon, be it a Solrock or your Okidogi, and you have Riolu just sitting on bench, that's immediately another threat. That's your next follow-up on board. A very strong presence just to be sitting around. Lucario versus Terrakion was something that I wanted to mention specifically because we were off the basic Terrakion that also has a retaliate attack. And again, with all the new buffs, that's what a lot of these conversations end up revolving around, because Terrakion being a basic Pokemon, it was a little bit easier to get out, but at the same time, you needed the extra energy commitment to it, and it was hitting for only 130 rather than 150. Ghouls mentioned the math being very important. The 150 damage was a lot more impactful than 130. Sure, you were clearing some of the basic decks with the 130, but we were never getting to those higher evolution numbers that we needed to be getting to when it came to Grass, when it came to Psychic. We were not able to get over the threshold with the Terrakion where we were able to kind of push that limit with the Lucario with just a buff or two, or having already set up the math with the Ting-Lu with a 30 spread. So Lucario was definitely a strong contender for that secondary attacker, and what we ended up settling on over the Terrakion that was shown off on Andrew's stream. So, and I think this is probably a good time to bring that up. Spence goes out to Akron, and again, the Solrock still has not been released yet. We still didn't know what the Solrock was going to do yet. We're still playing this resistance turning off Solrock. So we have no idea that the best attacker, that the best early game attacker, it has not even been released yet. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're going through this process where we see Andrew and Spence pair off in this conquest, and it's the first time that we see fighting really unveiled in a true form to the world. And it ran very well. It was using the Garganacl that would recover the energies, with the Terrakion that was the revenge attacker, so that's the first time that anyone started playing around with a revenge style attacker in the Terrakion. And us being Drago box heads anyway, we're like, okay, that's a basic revenge attacker that we can loop, right? That's originally where our heads were at. We thought, okay, that may work. But the thing that we wanted from the get-go, and why we stuck to R.D.T in the end game, is we didn't want to play the fighting deck like everybody else we assumed to be playing the fighting deck. When we saw Andrew's stream and we saw how his deck ran, we kind of thought that that's where people would land other than us. And so the cogs were already turning days before, and like I said, this is kind of like the perfect time to bring it up, because it started with this base list. Spence goes out to Akron, and we see, okay, this is what people are going to gravitate to, because they see Andrew play it. They see it run well, and we can beat this with our spread variant just pretty easily, actually. So that's where we were at with Lucario into the Mahone stream, into knowledge of the first fighting list being out there. And I think probably one of the next things that we'll go into is the, Okidogi versus no Okidogi, and then immediately after we learn about the Solrock. So it's like a lot of things started taking shape pretty quickly after that stream, and after we had a good headspace of where we thought the meta was going to be for other fighting decks.
Yeah, the argument with the no Okidogi versus Okidogi was we had the experience of playing against Vessel Rune a lot, which was a very, very solid fighting deck that did not play Okidogi. And as we were trying to develop the best way to use Lunatone, we got into the conversation of basic energy count. And when you play Okidogi, you have to play special energies. And so that will obviously hurt your consistency of being able to draw forward off the rocks. What we valued was the rock draw. We thought that was just straight up the thing that we needed to be focused on. And so with Ting-Lu, with the Lucario, we thought that there was a way where we could maybe increase just the consistency of the deck by cutting out Okidogi completely. I think we landed on 8 basic fighting on top of, we were playing Stone and Strong Energy at that point. And it was really, really cool. Like the fact that you had so much more of a dig with the basics, it did make a difference. It was very nice. But ultimately, it really fell on our ability to, like, I think oddly enough, help the Psychic matchup. Even though the Okidogi is weak to Psychic, 170 is really important to be able to clear resistance off of the Psychic guys. Also, the argument going back to the Terrakion too is it is a bad starter. It's really bad to start with. And with this argument for the Okidogi is it is another Pokemon that you can start with that can add an absurd amount of pressure just by attaching to it turn 1. And that was something that we really valued going forward. We talked about this low to the ground strategy. We saw the Mahone Garganacl deck that was just super gas when it set up and flowed. We just wanted something consistent, fast, and aggressive. And the Okidogi was just another thing of what that looked like. Another threat that the opponent had to worry about. And ultimately, it felt like we were losing another checkmate by dropping the Doki and just putting a big reliance on Bloodmoon. And there was, a little bit more focus around Bloodmoon. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we incorporated cards like Battle Compressor to be able to fish that out to make that way more consistent, fast and aggressive. But ultimately, it's just like Okidogi seemed like not only did it have that just run over factor, but it had that I have to actually worry about this card, and making the opponent think that way. The last thing I'll say about it was that there was an argument for people just being prepared for Okidogi. And we're just like, well, is it even worth playing if everybody knows that this card is going to be played? Are we going to see the enhanced hammers? Are we going to see the silent labs? That was something we had to really think about. But we came to the point where we just believed it was important for them to have that. It was more important for them to have that than us to be worried that they would have that answer. Let's make them have that answer, if that's the best way to say it. And 2, at this point, when we were going back and forth on Dogi or not, y'all had started testing other fighting variants, and I found that I couldn't keep up without Okidogi. Like, I felt like I really needed Okidogi in order to like have a chance in the fighting mirror, oddly enough, because I needed that damage output. So
Yeah, and one really important thing about how the Dogi is working and just how the deck is working is like you need to be able to be attaching from hand consistently. Like that's that's the big cycling goal, right? Is you're trying to attach from hand as much as you physically can in a way that matters for whether it's this turn, next turn, whether you're thinking 2 turns ahead. If you're, in a situation where you're set up well enough, like you should always be like, okay, like how am I getting an attach here? Or like how am I getting into that energy for Dogi to like get that ready? And we had like an early like group call as a team where we had like discussed the meta that we were like assuming would happen, and we had that based around the Garganackle deck, right, where we're seeing all of this like ability usage and how the Dogi needs its ability, the Garganackle needs its ability, and it's like, I don't want to call it a crutch, but you're entirely focused on that looping mechanic in the Mahone style list. So Psychic is going to want to run ability lock, whether it's Garbodor, whether it's Alolan Muck to like shut off the basics. So a lot of what we like work towards with the deck is how can we apply a pressure to where that ability lock doesn't matter. Like how can we make it to where, okay, Dogi's offline. Great. We don't need the Garganacle. We've got the Solrock, right? We've got Lucario at the ready, and it's really just that energy loop that keeps feeding into it, where we can have that pressure, have the mind game going, right? Where like they're being held to our pace, and being ability locked isn't as much of a worry.
Yeah, I had switched, just like Ghouls had said. I had changed to trying different versions because I felt like the core of Dog being a card that has to be answered in the format was huge. The draw engine was clearly there. It was finding that missing piece, and ultimately we did circle back. But in that process, it was really trying to uncover what pieces go with it. And early on, I had found that the Garganackle was very strong when your opponent did not respect the linear game plan and just let it happen. But when your opponent played anything to truly interact or interrupt said game plan, it was a very difficult process to keep up with. And I think you'd said crutch, and it's not to be like demeaning toward the card or the ability, but you end up building the deck and playing in a style that almost becomes dependent on that ability, as opposed to just being very declarative with your attachments. And that's a conversation. I kept using the term decisive energy attaching. Like you really have to make sure like you know when to attach, even as opposed to just drawing, right? Where the other version just kind of put you on an autopilot, and there wasn't that decision making that was as important. And yes, you had the energy there, but you at the same time you're not rewarded for making the correct decisions, and you could get punished for spreading your energy too thin across the board. Playing against someone who uses a Hex Maniac at the correct time completely blocks you out of playing the game anymore. And I think that was a big factor. I was quite the punching bag against Psychic, playing against both Monkey Dory Psychic and some of the other ability lock Psychic decks, Curse Kiss as well. Just learning how we combat those decks, because that's the biggest challenge. I feel honestly in a tournament setting, you can't bring a deck to the table if it doesn't have legs against Psychic. And at least the way I felt with the earliest versions, we hadn't figured out that consistency piece yet. I know that some of the team was more convinced, okay, I feel good about this matchup, but I really felt like there were a lot of hesitations coming in. And this is based on specifically the Monkey Dory deck that has bench barrier, that has all these ways to manipulate and move damage counters.
Yep.
So finding a way to bridge that, I think, was important. But then we found a missing piece, and it was kind of late. I'll be honest. I was actually leaning toward a slightly different fighting list up to this point, and then one of our fellow teammates was playing a particular card. I think everyone now knows its growing popularity of Marshadow, which I'll let Logan and Ghouls talk a little more about.
Yeah, definitely. Just to kind of circle back to the dog. So Okidogi is another one of those cards where inherently you're putting pressure on the instant that a rainbow energy goes on the thing. It becomes this massive tank that your opponents just kind of have to deal with. There would be times where, again, we would build up all these threats, and if your opponent ignores Okidogi to try to take out one of your other onboard threats, then cool, your Okidogi just gets to survive. Seen it so many times in testing where opponents would try to target, other areas of the board, and it didn't matter because the Dogi would become the card that, they were faced with again. Something that we actually haven't had a chance to mention yet, and probably what is, way more of an influential card than the Marshadow, which, and again, we'll get around to that too, but the new Solrock. So we finally, all of these things are happening within a couple of weeks time span, right? And again, we finally learn what the new Solrock does for us. Basic attacker, 110 HP, and for 1 energy, it does 70 damage that is not affected by resistance or weakness. So it turned the early Dogi pressure, where, okay, well, we could just be getting an energy on a Dogi turn 1, into, okay, now we're actually just swinging turn 1 for 70, and we're coming out and smacking you right out of the gate. Along with the busted draw engine, along with developing this board of, I don't want to say invincible, but great attackers that are going to hit you from so many different angles. Right, and Okidogi paired with, the new Rock, the new Marshadow, all of it just kind of was a great cake that, baked itself, really.
Yeah, a delicious one at that. No, the way that the Solrock just answered all of our problems was pretty crazy. The fact that it hits through resistance made the Psychic matchup, in my opinion, so much more doable. We saw that we now not only have the Okidogi, we now not only have the Ting-Lu, we now not only have the Bloodmoon attacking early, we have the Solrock. And that is just crazy amount of pressure to put on so many decks. They shift to the 70 HP basics to be able to avoid Raging Bolt. It doesn't matter. Our Solrock is swinging 70. And on top of that, with damage buffs, it's knocking out support Pokemon too. And so then it becomes this crazy low maintenance rating tool on top of just like part of the consistency engine. And so we see in testing the Psychic matchup, we put them in like this weird spot where they have to answer something really quick that's like knocking out their basics, or we're setting up a revenge kill on whatever attacker they end up being able to power up to manage that counter pressure really easily. Because the thing is with Psychic is everybody says that that's a bad matchup. There's resistance, blah blah blah. The truth is that resistance doesn't matter. It does, but you know what I'm saying. Like it doesn't matter. Like in the early turns, and Psychic has a tendency to be a little bit slower. They can pop off, sure. Like there can be some crazy turns, but they need to have all of their guys in play. They need to be setting up things. And their counter pressure guys are very, very situational. Is the problem. It's like Iron Boulder is probably their best counter pressure attacker, but you have to match hand size. You're having to match hand size while getting your attachments or your energy D Valley on top of having to match Fighting's hand size, which Fighting's hand size gets large really fast. And so it's just really good at like answering what they have to deal with you. On top of like the Okidogi being able to hit through basically everything with resistance, on top of all of your damage buffs that we got. So yeah, that Solrock just really came in and like fixed a really big problem matchup. Especially like, again, one energy to start taking knockouts. It's literally fan Rotom, right? Everybody talks about how bad fan Rotom is for setup decks. It's like, yeah, we have that plus more. Wait, there's more. So many like full like aggressive options with the deck, and like Logan said, like we come off the bus just asking questions. And Solrock literally did that for us, for sure. Now, like Chucky was saying, moving forward, one of our teammates, there was a lot of different fighting decks being like worked on at the same time. We'll let you guys talk a little bit more about that a bit later. But SBO brought forward a Marshadow deck that was using the damage increasing Knackle that basically made it to where that thing was like taking knockouts over and over and over again. And it was very frustrating to deal with. It really opened our eyes to how strong that is, because it's a card that a lot of people wrote off initially. 60 damage, 2 energies, like, is that really worth the commitment? That is another card that is fantastic early, like into setup decks. Being able to pressure opponents' basics one turn 2, like if you went first or something like that, where they're not set up. You can see that in the finals, in the turns. Like it's literally, okay, I started with this. I guess I'll do it. Like, I'll be real with you. I would not have gone down that road if I didn't start at all. But it's a great example of showing that this is yet another card that applies a lot of pressure with having something completely different for the opponent to have to play around too. It's not like it's a 110 HP basic, it's a lot for some decks to deal with. This thing is invincible. It takes knockout, so it's like, are you going to be able to set up, recover, and gust around this all in the same turn early? Probably not. And then if you don't take a knockout with it, you just retreat it for like it to come back into another time. So, and what really sold me on the Marshadow 2 was our mirror matches. Like I felt like that was probably the most played matchup that we tested this whole time getting ready for the event was mirror matches. Evan was using this gross Machamp deck, which I can't wait for him to talk about. Like, I was getting crushed, and it was like because of this freaking Marshadow. I'm having to like Ting-Lu around it, and we were seeing max value out of like the Marshadow plus the Knackle, and it just got like my gears turning. I'm like, okay, like Marshadow is probably just as good. And I think Chucky was talking about this, if I remember correctly. It's like Ting-Lu map sets up Marshadow knockouts too. which is really really strong. So anyway, yeah, the Marshadow like blew my mind in the mirror, and it felt like it kind of devolved into who could get max mileage out of it. So
Yeah, that Marshadow can be scary. Like if you get on even 2 knockouts in a row with it, if your opponent doesn't have a gust option, that's it. You mentioned the Machamp, and that was another route that we had kind of looked into when we realized that we didn't want to be relying on the Garganacl.
Go ahead.
Okay. I didn't know what you were. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just gonna tell you, go ahead. Like, let it rip with the. I'll make a timestamp of this, but yeah, just let it rip with the Machamp stuff. Like, let it rip.
Okay.
You can go for.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting tech to have in a deck where it's your bench barrier, right? You use the Machoke that makes it so that abilities can't place damage counters on your Pokemon, attacks can't place damage counters, can't do damage to your benched Pokemon. And then later in the game, if you're following this, trying to attach your energies the best you can, it's suddenly a 300 HP 2 energy attacker hitting for 200 damage. And it's this big wall at the end that they have to try and get through while they, couldn't do any spread damage. They can Monkey Dory, right? But the damage doesn't go anywhere. It just comes off of their Pokemon and, flutters off to nowhere because of the Machoke. And I really enjoyed it. I never had any problems with it, but it's nowhere near as fast. It doesn't have the same kind of pressure. And the joy of keeping somebody on their toes that fast with a deck, that's cooler than having a wall like 20 minutes into a game, in my opinion. Like it made sense that we moved on from it.
Go ahead. You keep going. You got it.
Yeah, we ended up moving on to the buff Garganacl as like if we can run the other Garganacl, why can't we just run this one if we're just being, smart about our attachments? Because that's a lot of damage. If we're talking the 30 from that, 20 from Muscle, 30 from Fight Milk, 30 from Grant if you run Grant in your deck. That's another fun one that Chucky and I were running in our 3K lists. And we can go in on that as well. But the Grant is big. It's another 30 damage. It is your supporter for turn, but if you bin it, it has the capability of being put back into your hand from discard by discarding 2 other cards. And that portion of it isn't your supporter for turn. So you can try and math it out where, you're getting rid of cards you wouldn't need anymore. Say you have like a Nest Ball or a Quick Ball late game and you've already set up all your Pokemon. You can bin that now. And suddenly you're doing an extra 30 damage with your Grant. And when we were running the Garganacl, that's an extra 60. Which Solrock doing 150, no resistance, is disgusting.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's also a lot more to be having to pay attention to, a lot more to have in your hand at any given point. Kind of the same issue we were having with Metacham, where it's like, oh, if only I had that one more damage mod in the 20 damage mods I'm running in this list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't need that many. It was greedy. It was admittedly greedy.
Yeah. And I think it actually came back the whole reason we ended up back where we were at. It was kind of a really funny thing between Ghouls and myself the night before the event. But we'll get to that in a sec. So just like the basis of this deck and the idea that at least I came to was the Solrock was insane. I honestly need to write a formal apology because I had written when they first announced the Solrock, I was like, well, the resistances matters more. We're not going to attack with Solrock because we don't want to risk losing it. Then we realized, wait, it's actually really hard to deal with that thing on turn 2 if you're hitting with it and taking KOs. And the most important thing with this deck, again with energy efficiency, is if you can have something in the actively putting on pressure, but it can't be return KO'd, and you get one turn to do that second attach, like your chances of winning shoot up tremendously. And we have multiple routes to do that, right? Ting-Lu is very hard to answer turn 1 or turn 2. Even if it's not taking a KO, it's just hard to return KO. Like your opponent has to have the exact thing set up already to do it. So having multiple routes to do that and through the game of being able to set up those phases makes things tremendous. So the next basis was trying to figure out how much can we just rely on Solrock. We have the dog. Admittedly, at this point, I had moved off of Ting-Lu because I was more concerned about bench barrier. And given I felt Water and Psychic would be very popular, we all played bench barrier in our Water and Psychic decks, and that was something that was a challenge. It was possible, but it was trying to map out how to get around it. And the mindset then was dedicated spread, then you finish with these other walls. And that's it's really important. Like, come back and listen to this multiple times. Like, it's important to know this is not a true spread deck. That's actually the beauty of this deck is that it is. I almost think of it as it's a very flexible. There's no flow chart, right? It's a very flexible deck that asks a question, and based on what your opponent's answer is, that dictates what you do next. Mm-hmm. It's the ebb and flow of this deck is beautiful. So prior to getting to that with Ting-Lu, I was trying other versions. I actually brought them a champ because what admittedly happened, not to take from Evan, because Evan's the one that took it and went on a tear, but I came up with the idea for the Machamp after talking to Mickey and realizing I'm getting just smacked against Dragon and Psychic. I need this bench barrier. And it was really cool, but then we lost a little bit of that speed. And admittedly, having tried to set up a stage 2, or just like revolving our deck around trying to set that up, it takes a lot of pieces and consistency from the deck. Like you just lose some of that consistency and explosiveness. So eventually, I had moved to the Garganackle, thinking, okay, I want to make I want to make the stage 2 worth it, right? Like I think Ghouls would agree with this. A stage 2 has to have an immediate impact on the game that says answer this or you lose. Like that's I think in the basis of GLC, all stage 2s need to do that. Otherwise, there's no point in playing them. Like it's wasteful. So I felt like the Garganackle added with some of the other pressure really created problems for decks. Like Solrock hitting for 160 so at some points in the game is very difficult. The first time I was actually even sold on the Solrock was I pulled off a turn 1 donk against an Iron Boulder hitting for 140 just thanks to Fight Milk and Guzma Hala. I had another time where I pulled off a 160 donk because I was able to pull, or a 150 donk rather, because I was able to pull off the turn 2 Garganackle. And this is again just Solrock, nothing else in the deck, right? So anyway, I did realize that there was a consistency. And then you fast forward to, we figure out Marshadow is now this other factor, and you add all these damage pumps to it. Well, if you look at Ting-Lu spreading 30, that is a damage buff. There are very few decks that actually worry about trying to clear damage from their bench. So this now created the new basis for how this deck attacks. Like it almost like we made the full circle back to R.D.T and came up with a new way to approach the deck. You can easily apply Ting-Lu to the active, take your swing. If the opponent has no way to answer Ting-Lu, they'll just lose to it. If they have a way to react, you now have 3 different pivot points with which you can attack. Either through Dog being another wall, Solrock being able to take damage because there's a buff, or the Marshadow cleaning up. And I had multiple games in the tournament where I took 2, 3. I even had a 4 prize just a blowout with Marshadow because I'd set up Ting-Lu twice and there was nothing my opponent could do about it. Like I could see the visible frustration as the game kept going because they realized the game was already over and again, I still have 5 prizes sitting here. They already knew the game was over because of how it was set up. So that was really cool to see that we were able to map out an attack plan that attacks from multiple axes like that.
Yeah, and a couple of points that I want to make, because just like piggybacking on what everybody else has been saying. So the mirror match and Drago box were some of the main matchups that we were early testing against, and in those matchups we were seeing the Marshadow come up big, specifically in the Drago box matchup. You get Ting-Lu off just a couple of times, and then Marshadow goes invincible the rest of the game. And it's always another one of the questions that we want as a team to be asking our opponent is, do you have the resource to move X, Y, or Z, to accomplish X, Y, or Z? And if you don't have that answer, then we're just going to roll over. And if you do have the answer, cool. That's a resource that you've had to expend to accomplish moving this Marshadow. So that was a big point with the Marshadow, is it was something that asked questions in a different way. It made your opponent commit resources to deal with it. And even if they were able to move around it, generally what would happen was we would still get to promote it the next turn, do it again. Just like sweep with this thing after a couple of Ting-Lu hits. Mid-game KOs with the deck are such an important balance, and something that I think is where a lot of the skill expression comes out. I can't tell you how many times I learned through testing that if an escape rope is played, you better not push anything that has less than 100 HP if you're hoping that your opponent's about to swing the Lucario, because Solrock is so lethal. There were so many times where I expected one thing of Evan specifically. This is matches that Evan and I played. I would expect one thing specifically, and because of the way that the deck can apply pressure, I would get another thing in my face. And then again, that monster on the bench got to stay. Lucario got to stay for another turn, where Evan was just able to pop off with it in turns after the fact. Another big thing that we learned is that we're using a lot of our recovery for this Solrock. The fact that we're committing so hard to attacking with the Solrock in the early stages of the game meant that we were having to commit our Night Stretchers, our Rescue Stretchers, our Klaras, to make sure that we had the rock back on board. There was another card that came into the list a little bit later that protected our Solrock just a little bit to be able to survive some of these one-shots that it may otherwise have been KO'd to. But the recovery and the idea that it was like a Dogi loop deck, that was not the case at all in any way, shape, or form. Our recovery was very rarely going to recover an Okidogi. If anything, it was the Bloodmoon that it was recovering more so than that monster.
Yep.
And then finally, like Chucky said, routing against decks that had Bench Barrier and Psychic specifically became just a conversation of, okay, Chuck, just push the rock. Just start with the rock, push the rock, make them answer the rock. It's not a Ting-Lu matchup. Instead, we need a Ting-Lu one time over the course of the game to set up some Blood Moon math. You know, and we generally wanted that to come later in the game when their bench was full. You know, if you Ting-Lu early and you waste your Silent Lab on turn 1 to hit 30 on, say, 1-2 bench Pokemon, I think that's a waste. So just sit back, conserve, play with your rock against your bench barrier Pokemon, and make them kind of have to answer that as your first, you know, wave of attacker.
Yeah, if I can come back to piggyback, because that point's super important in the Psychic matchup, because I still think that matchup can be tight, but if you know your ways to maneuver it, it's important. In the 3K, I played against a very strong, competent Psychic player that's local there at Akron, and she started Mr. Mime, Bench Barrier, in the active. I intentionally played in a way that kind of slow rolled the Ting-Lu, so I use a Solrock. I make sure to get the Mime out of play, and kind of force her to commit to playing out her bench. She fills the bench. There's no monkey to be seen. There's no Mr. Mime. I completely pivot my game plan away from Dog and Rock to Ting-Lu.
Yep.
And just roll the game from there, because Ting-Lu now sets everything up, and then Marshadow comes in. Marshadow and Solrock take the last remaining KOs because Ting-Lu can't be dealt with until it's too late.
Yep.
She actually had a really cool response with Mimikyu after a pivot to then take a KO and be invincible, but because of the damage I had already was able to set up and she couldn't commit her recovery, I was able to use Hawlucha Ting-Lu to actually win the game at the end. So it's like really important that damage can matter, but you have to be very patient. And again, it's that pivoting option, like knowing which matchup you can do this and when you need to move to the right attack plan.
Yeah, the ability for this deck to put your opponent in a bad position is just crazy, because you can play around X and Y, but you can't play around Z. You know, and it's like really, really, I think it's really fun to play that way. Like, and just being able to like have like that flow to be able to like, oh, like this is time to Ting-Lu. Because you can Ting-Lu to set up math, you know, like in the middle of the game. But sometimes like you can just like commit to going to Ting-Lu late game, especially if they have like some 90 HP support Pokemon and they burnt too many like resources on their like switch outs. Like you can just like you can really make some crazy comebacks, or like even just like close out games that way. You know, Escape Rope, I feel like, I mean, y'all can fight me on this, but I feel like this deck utilizes Escape Rope like better than any deck I've played Escape Rope in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, all right, well, let me just go here then. Like, let me just start Ting-Luing your bench, and it's game. Like, it's crazy the flexibility that the deck has. Because, you know, we've been talking about it, but the Bloodmoon is a whole nother factor there, where you can say like, oh, hitting. I think maybe Evan was saying it, or sorry if Chucky did, but like you pop everything for 30. Like, okay, that Bloodmoon is now swinging for 190 on all of those Pokemon. That is insane.
Plus, they already have that 30 damage on
Plus,
them.
they have 30 damage on them already. So, like,
Yeah.
and then you compare that in with the Hawlucha math, and Hawlucha something else, and it just becomes, like, gross. And that's the other thing that they have to play around, too, right? It's like, you can drop the Hawlucha out of nowhere and hit two of their attackers. That Hawlucha can set up Lucario math, or it can set up Bloodmoon math. If they're like a 140 HP basic Pokemon, they now have to worry about getting knocked out by the Bloodmoon. And Klara exists. You know what I'm saying? There's so many different things that they have to account for while being like, well, I just got Hawlucha'd, so let me show you what that does, you know. So it's a crazy card, but that kind of gives you like the story, or like the history of like how we got the general like concept of the deck down, the attackers in it, and how they kind of like flow. Again, we've said it here tonight. There is no flow chart. It's a lot of you present this to the opponent. How did they react? Like I got a chance to play against Brooke English in Swiss. Phenomenal player. Like, I was so excited to get to play against Brooke. If you were to ask me if I think Ting-Lu is optimal into Monkey Dory Psychic, I would tell you, no, probably not. I wouldn't go there if I was you. But I won by Ting-Lu.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I started Ting-Lu. Logan had mentioned it before. I had a chance to ground Crasher with a stadium and only hit one bench Pokemon. I didn't do it. I prepared like an attachment on the bench, Okidogi, and I just passed. Brooke then proceeded to bench more Pokemon. There was no Mime, there was no Monkey. And I'm just like, well, this is the time to start Ting-Luing.
Bang.
And I Ting-Lued. There was no bench barrier drop. There was no Monkey drop. I'm going to do it again. And again. And then just like, okay, like I proposed that. And unfortunately for Brooke, there was some really bad prizing and some like, there was no easy way for them to counter pressure the Ting-Lu in the moment. And so it just like screamed like, okay, like this is the right call in this moment. Mm-hmm. And it's a deck that really allows you to have that skill expression, to be able to read what's in front of you, to be able to see what the future plays are. Because the truth is, if I were to go for that second Ting-Lu there, hit everything for 60, and then Brooke drops the Monkey Dory and attaches a dart, guess what? I'm still going to Ting-Lu the next turn. Mm-hmm. Because of that, there's already all that math set up in play. What is 30 coming my way or 60 coming my way? You just have to be able to think like that. You have to be like, all right, where's my math going to matter based off of what they can do to play around what I'm offering? Like there's just a lot of like forethought that you have to have, regardless if the deck is all essentially an all basic deck, right? So anyway, the encouragement there is just to lean in, sit down, play the deck, and don't feel like you have to flowchart everything. It's something that will help you become a better player throughout your journey, for sure. Next, I kind of want to get into just kind of I call it like the deck building battles that we had along the way. Some like important cards that were in and out of the list, and just where we kind of sat on it. You know, as we do these deck deep dives, it's kind of one of my goals is to encourage the community to build and get better at building as well, and for people to understand why we make the decisions we make. And we just want to be able to encourage the community that way. I'm going to start off with a card that was super controversial when we were first getting started with the list, which would be Ball Guy. Being able to grab 3 cards out of your deck, just as the items themselves, on top of like the 3 targets that they grab, is crazy when it comes to a deck thinning standpoint. And originally it was so controversial because we weren't running balls. But I had really valued an extra way to see Hisuian Heavy Ball. Because if we prized one of the main Pokemon, that was a big deal. So having an extra out for that was just something I like really valued from like the start. And so it took a lot of convincing to get the squad on board. There was like this like shift whenever the Medicham was dropped, where one of the slots that like I put in over, and I think it was just an energy, ended up being the Team Magma's Great Ball, or Team Magma's Ball, whatever it's called. And that card made Ball Guy insane, because not only are you thinning your deck of those 6 cards, I guess you can say 7 too, because it's thinning Ball Guy itself. If we're talking about getting end or something like that in the conversation. But if you get an energy out and you're able to dig with that energy, then you're thinning your deck of 3 more cards. That's crazy. And then a deck that is trying to be super oppressive to hit the cards that it needs to see, thinning out of that many cards really increases your odds at just being as oppressive as possible. So Ball Guy ended up being a really big card for us. I know I personally got max value out of it all weekend long. I was very happy that we decided to keep it. Oddly enough, I did not use Ball Guy, I think, maybe once to like get the Hisuian heavy ball, but literally getting the rock set up plus the draw for the turn was very, very common. It was just such a great card all day.
Yeah, Ball Guy was huge. Battle VIP Pass, also big. We love that card. Being able to like Korrina or Arven for that, to just get both of the rocks right off the bat. Disgusting. All of these kind of like setup things that that we used, all that shredding through the deck, it really makes the buffs matter in that like you're able to reach them. There's so much less fluff in the deck. You can get into your muscle band, you can get into your strong energy. Like everything's so much more reachable. And I was hesitant about Ball Guy. I don't really like it. I feel like a lot of that was because like I don't like Timer Ball, and so like I just associate the two together. But that's a me problem. I get it. I ran it. It's a good card. Yeah, double tails for nothing. Yeah, but it's great being able to grab the energy in fighting and water decks. It's big. Those Team Magma and Team Aqua balls are huge, even though there aren't Team Aqua or Team Magma Pokemon that matter in GLC. It's just the energy grab off a Ball Guy is just so good, so crisp.
Yeah. So funny enough, the Battle VIP Pass was a card that last minute Evan and I cut from our deck. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Ball Guy was so strong that it didn't feel like we necessarily needed both, and we were trying to fit other specific cards, which we can get into in a bit. But the VIP is still very strong because it is something that offers you the explosive nature of the deck. Like anything that opens up the ability to draw the cards that you're wanting, but also attack potentially turn one with this deck is what you want to be doing. I was very all in on Battle VIP till the very end, which is kind of ironic because of that. I have in my I think we all have different types of deck building creeds. I have a big one with Ball Guy. I have to play a minimum number or I get itchy. So if I don't play a minimum number of ball cards in the deck, I feel like it's off. And that's just a me thing, but I felt like for a while I couldn't reach that number. But then when we had introduced, actually, Ghouls, you came to me, I think it was the night of or the night after SBO had kind of showed off the Marshadow. We were talking about the ideas because at that point I'm still on the Garganackle, and you basically said, what if we looked at R.D.T again, but we just trimmed the fat. We took the Metacham out. We try to be consistent. That's literally a week before is when we can circle back to this, right? And when we did that, we're looking at what those other options are, and that's when the Ball Guy really stuck out. Hey, we're trimming the balls that don't really do a lot for us. We can now fit something like this here because we're not trying to search ignition energy, and that's where the magma came up, and it's just huge. I mean, just think of a supporter that says Battle VIP Pass plus draw 3 cards. That's literally what it is. But in a pinch, I had multiple games. I know you mentioned in the tournament it didn't come up, but I had 2 games very specifically, like one actually where I did not have what I needed. My Bloodmoon was started. I went first, and I was against a deck that was trying to effectively set up. It was a psychic deck, and they were trying to like hand disrupt and do a bunch of nonsense, and they hand disrupt pretty much immediately, but thankfully don't attack and or anything yet. And I literally Pokegear into Ball Guy, get everything, and just unlock the whole deck and just start blasting. Like I went from literally being behind and it looks unwinnable to wait, what happened? If someone looked away in 2 minutes, that's what one turn, and it was all because of Ball Guy. So like that alone to me, and I'd already been sold on it, but another play that's really important is that this deck doesn't play a lot of ways to shuffle cards back into the deck. We have one out. We have Rescue Stretcher. I've actually had situations where Rescue Stretcher in mid-game is able to put that back, and then you pair it with Ball Guy plus like Brooklet Hill, and immediately you just completely reset your board off the back of getting Avery or Parallel City. I have had that come up in testing, and like that's really good. So it has applications throughout the game. It thins. I think both Ball Guy and VIP are very strong in this deck for the explosive nature of what you want to do. And we play enough things that it's not hard to get rid of VIP if you don't get to use it turn one. So it still serves a purpose.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't have too much to echo off the back of that. I mean, you guys have said basically everything that I would say. Team Magma's Great Ball ended up being cracked. It ended up breaking Ball Guy even further. We were just in this mindset, like, let's build this as consistent as we can, because if we can play the game, then we generally are winning the game. And you do have a lot of ways to, the last thing I'll say is you do have a lot of ways to discard the Battle VIP Pass if it ends up getting stuck later on. There is Ultra Ball, there is Guzma Hala, there is Cynthia and Caitlin in the list. So we have all these three as discard options to be able to pitch it later on. And you know, just to circle back to one of Ghoul's points, because it was only said like once during that whole spiel, but Hisui and Heavy Ball, being able to get that, and again, like he said, it didn't come up for me much during the tournament run at Full Grip, but in testing, prizing one of your rocks was absolutely devastating to the deck. So having that extra out to be able to fish out the Hisui and Heavy Ball was just a no-brainer for us.
I think it's really funny, by the way, that Chucky 86 Battle VIP, because he was the person that convinced me to play it. I was just I don't know. I mean, do I really need that? Because it's like dead after turn one, and I think we were testing and he like opened Battle VIP a lot, probably with a chaotic swell if I had to guess. But I just kept on getting hit by the turn one Battle VIP, and I'm like, okay, I think it's time to play it.
I did top deck a VIP in my tournament run. It was like, it's the best moment, man. It's like, I'll draw for turn. I think I'll start my game with Battle VIP Pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels like $1 million right there for sure. The other thing I want to talk about is just like some tools that we went back and forth on. We did mention earlier that we tried to play a list with no Okidogi, and also with Okidogi we played with this. The initial list played HP buffing tools. So we played the Fighting Fury Belt, and then we also played, what is it, Big Charm?
Yep.
Or what? It's
Bravery Charm.
Bravery Charm.
Or the cape,
That's
for those who were cheap enough to afford the gold cape.
Yeah, let's go. But the plus 50 HP, and the mindset was that we wanted to make Bloodmoon and Ting-Lu just thick boys. Like, essentially just like really hard to deal with as early as turn one. And having a lot of just, I hate to just like be saying this over and over again, but it's extra questions, you know, they have to have answers for. Like, and you can stagger it to where you're going to get max value off of just one. In a 190 HP Ting-Lu, or like a 200 HP Bloodmoon. That's what Chucky was really big on. Was really good in testing. It was super solid. We initially changed to the Focus Sash because we found, we found in the Psychic matchup that the Focus Sash was just legitimately a lot better. And being able to make your Okidogi tank a hit was really important. And then also just the uses of Focus Sash would become really strong kind of throughout the rest of our testing, as we saw it just allowed us to be like a little bit more flexible with Solrock attacking early. You know, we talked about not trying to waste a recovery card on it. And that way we can have like a little bit more leniency and being able to be aggressive with the Solrock and not feel like we're about to get, you know, Lost City'd or something like that. It was a really, really cool card. It just made it to where it didn't matter about your opponent's numbers, which I thought, I know that y'all had like a little bit of a different choice with the tools, but I will say that I think that for me, Focus Sash was one of the most important cards all day. I know that there's been discussion of running Focus Sash with like even Fighting Fury Belt as giving the opponent like another, you know, thing to waste their Field Blower on. But I don't know if it's needed, but I could see the value in it for sure. I'm not gonna like, you know, look at somebody like they're making a mistake because of that. But the tools were pretty big. We landed on the U-turn board, just having a perfect pivot on the rocks, like all game long, which is just super, super it just makes everything smooth, right? And then the muscle band math was pretty important for the Solrock, and I mean, honestly, a lot of things. The plus 20 was way more important than the plus 10. And especially if you're not running Grant and you're running like the Marshadow. I mean, we saw time and time again it come up, even in the finals, like being able to gust a Garbodor and just like knock it out with the Marshadow was pretty big. So yeah, the tools kind of where we landed. Focus Sash mainly being a initial answer to Psychic, and then having, you know, more than good reasons to run it over anything else.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna hop in real quick because Focus Sash is one of those cards that I think that through our Turbo Blaze Trials tournament, we learned something on a night. That's the cool thing about running the online event. We watched, and I just went back and made sure, because like I want to give credit where credit's due. We watched David from Chicago GG's playing a very off-the-wall fighting list in a time where Mega Evolution was still not legal in our tournament scene, and I just watched literally the Focus Sash put in so much work for him over, you know, the course of a couple turns in a game, and that sprung the question, hey, why don't we try Focus Sash in some of these lists? Because it seems like if what we are looking for is to buy a turn through HP boosts, which that's where we were originally at, we wanted to create these big monsters that you know weren't going to be able to deal with on a single turn. And what if we just turn that into essentially, you know, guaranteed, you know, sturdy, the effect of sturdy in the Pokemon video game. You know, we're going to live this hit, we're going to live it on 10 HP, but we're guaranteed to live it, or we're getting your Field Blower for this. And then maybe a stadium sticks later. The training court is a big one. You know, anytime that the training court gets to stick around more than a couple turns late game, it gives us the ability to just recycle those energies and push forward with the deck. So the tool conversation morphing from the HP boosting tools to the Focus Sash specifically came over the course of, you know, a weekend tournament, watching some of the community. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and also, I mean, talking about the stadiums too, like that was kind of like something that I always pair like stadiums and tools kind of together when I'm contemplating the deck. And we were back and forth on just number one, which stadiums to run, because there are so many great stadiums. You know, and then the stadium count as well. And then the conversation whether or not to play Lusamine, that was also a whole debacle there. And the way we settled like landing on it is that number one, we came to terms that we were not a Ting-Lu deck, that we were not a spread deck. So we went between stadium counts. The lowest that we went was 3, to see like, hey, like how much space can we get here? And we found that that was a little too low. And so then we went up to 4. And that is the conversation of like, it's crunch time. Like, okay, we know that Brooklet is a must, and Training Port is a must. Silent Lab is a must, because we were, debating whether or not we even needed Hex. Hex came out of the, out of the list, in the list, and we were playing Lusamine as well, because the thought was if we were playing against Bench Barrier, then we could just Lusamine for the lab again, and then just, Hawlucha, drop lab, knockout. Because most bench barriers are set 70 or lower, minus Shaman, And we just kind of came to a spot where Hex was just a very strong power card, like we always say it is, had max value, so it kind of took the role of like what that Lusamine did for us, where we didn't necessarily want to even have the Lusamine in our opening hand, right? It was a good card to be able to continue pressure, just like Senlin is in the deck. We're able to get back that extra gust. And then we also valued, over Lusamine, boss or Lysander. The ability to just like straight up bring up a bench barrier and knock it out. That kind of played a very similar role, and like being able to pressure things. On top of just having balls for game came up so many times, especially with Marshadow. So we kind of like, as far as like getting this whole like making the board completely open to attack, that's where we settled at. Was we needed to have lab, we needed to have Hex, boss on top of Guzma, and those all kind of like work hand in hand in disrupting and being able to knock out who or what we wanted. Again, Lusamine is really cool. It's a strong card, but ultimately, I think the other options are better. And then for the stadiums, going back to which ones we settle on, I think the final conversations were between Viridian, Parallel, and Artisan.
Yep.
So we wanted to have, I personally wanted to have Viridian in the deck because I bought a full art Viridian. You'll find that some of my deck choices are actually because of that. I did include Counter Energy and Egg Mill initially because I bought a full art Counter Energy and then realized, oh, this is broken. But the argument for Viridian is that it's another energy search, and it makes Guzma Hala into a draw 3 off of, if you have the rocks, which was pretty important for me. But with the inclusion of the magma ball, it just felt like that's another energy search. Like, do we really need to have that? That would be 4 energy searches at that point, which kind of seems like pretty wild. So I ended up settling against that, and the argument was the Artisan versus the Parallel. And when Parallel was a power card, the main goal of this deck that you keep on hearing us say all night: set up, play the game. And that's why we opted to go Artisan. I mean, we talked about, I feel like the stadiums more than anything, almost, right? Like, I felt like me and Chucky were just like going back and forth, like over and over and over and over about it. But yeah, so that was like our headspace and like what we tried and what we valued. Why we ended up not going with Lusamine, and we tested a lot of games, and that's just kind of where we landed. Hex was just really good. It was really important in the Fighting Mirror. Let's see, the other like cool card with like the conversation of, and this is where I would love to hear you all talk about, the 7th Fighting Energy. So it was a card that was kind of, in my eyes, it's like, do we play the Magma Ball and then have the 7th fighting as well? Like, that's just a lot of draw. Or is that like, is this like the bare minimum that's like consistent, and that would just be nice to have? But y'all did feel like, going into the event, y'all wanted the 7th. So what do y'all think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the extra energy, because we cut the VIP pass, right? Like we were more worried about like being able to not only be able to cycle draw consistently, like hit the lunar cycle, but have more opportunities to really like pull off the big like Bloodmoon Ursaluna play, like having that energy for sure. And I mean, we've talked multiple times about like the consistent need to attach, and just like the thought process behind that of, oh, hey, I have to choose now. Do I want to try and draw more and still hit an energy? Or do I want to attach now and feel safe in that, but not have as much leeway with how I'm playing this turn? And that 7th energy opens that up a little, on top of like all of the search that we do have, in that, if we do have, 4 energy on board, instead of just having 2 energy between deck discard prizes, we've got a 3rd, so a little more of a chance. It just felt more safe, just going into an event as big as we were. And VIP definitely felt scarier, because like top decking a VIP your 5th turn of the game versus top decking a basic energy. That basic energy is looking pretty nice, but yeah, that felt like the biggest nudge in that direction. I also wanted to kind of piggyback off of, you were talking about, boss's orders over something like Luzamine. We also tested the Hariyama from Mega Evolution for a bit.
The hairy mama. Let's talk about it.
That one hairy mama, Michelle. Yeah, it was a fun one. But yeah, we didn't go that direction. Getting it stuck in active was a nightmare, which we had the same issue with Garganackle. If that gets stuck up there, if you haven't had the time to like attach to it as a backup attacker, that's bad. And Hariyama had a very high attack cost for what it was.
Yep.
And yeah, we didn't go that way. I think I would have rather ran Repel over Hariyama as just like another half of an escape rope, because it was just a lot of resources. So
yeah, the Hariyama was kind of a birthing process where I'm just trying other fighting cards that were new, and we're still running the energy accelerating Knackle too. I think that's relevant because it's a little easier to attack with it, but then we realized, well, if we're not going to be on that, you can't play Hariyama. It's never going to get to attack. So why not just play boss? Like, you can rely on boss, Sinlin, Seeker, Guzma. Like, that's enough things and rope. Like, you have so many ways to move, so it's like enough. So I'm gonna wrap a couple things up here, because I want to double back to something related to the items. I think it would be good to talk about. But it also ties into the 7th fighting and the grit. So to clarify, we've been talking a lot about one list versus not. So yeah. The list you're looking at is, of course, the 60 that Ghouls ran. Insane run. Kudos to him. He was playing the suboptimal list, let me tell you. And I'm actually kidding. If I had to go back, I would probably play the exact same list Ghouls did. Maybe one card different, because there's one card I still have a lot of weight on. I love it in the deck for very specific reasons, and that's Fighting Fury Belt. But we'll get to that. So the night before, I I had played a lot of games with the other version of the deck that was playing excessive pump spells. And then we finally added Ting-Lu to that, and I realized playing with ghouls, I'm 5 cards different than just playing R.D.T. And the main 5 cards were, I'm playing Evo Incense, I'm playing the Knuckle line, and I can't even remember what the other card was, but there was, or sorry, I think it was Grants. Actually, it was 4 cards different. Like it was that close, right? So realizing, okay, I still want to maximize how much output I could have, and I put a lot of emphasis through the testing. Like I expected Psychic and Water to be 2 of the most popular decks. I expected the Mirror to be popular. Turns out Psychic, Fighting, and Water were the top 3 decks there. So I was correct in that assessment.
Yeah.
It turns out hitting 110 with Solrock is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is you need to be able to knock out opposing Solrocks, but also you need to be able to knock out Wobbuffet.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, at least playing all the games that I did, that having as many possible combinations to get to the 110 were the best way to route those games. So that was what led me to have such a high stance for Fury Belt. I had a lot of games where Fury Belt plus Fight Milk on Solrock would blast the game out. And now they've got a 150 attacker to deal with if they're not going to deal with turn 1 or turn 2. So there was that. The other mindset that I had was I felt that Focus Sash was incredibly strong, and I still do think it is. I think, and I will admit, I think it was a mistake I didn't play it. I had a fear of a number of different effects that could play around that card, and that some of that's from testing. Again, this is the problem when you test against some of the best players in the world at a specific format. Kudos to my team and some of the other community players that helped me test. Like, I'm playing against people who know Focus Sash is there, so they are using effects to play around it to make it worse. So that kind of skewed my judgment, I think. That said, those are things to be aware of. Monkey Dory can be used to work around that. Intellion may not necessarily care about it. Like, so you have to time when you use it correctly. But when you do, you get max value, right? So in my thinking, I would honestly consider playing both. Where the cut is what's tough. That all said, the reason I went back to this was the number 1 card I wanted to add to the deck was Grant. And I felt like Grant is a card that's hard to get to, necessarily, because it's a supporter. I have limited ways to just search supporters. I need to churn through the deck. So I wanted to have more consistency with my draw, which is where the 7th Fighting came from. And then, again, we're thinking, I need these cards, where can I make cuts? And it was kind of a rush process, but the cuts ended up being VIP Pass and Focus, or not Focus Sash, Reset Stamp, sorry. And I just played Fighting Fury Belt over Focus Sash. Those were the 3 differences in the deck. And I will say, it's anecdotal, I did have a game where Fighting Fury Belt made my Psychic opponent very mad, and they said, why does the bear have 190? And had they had the, if it had been Focus Sash, I would have lost, but that's totally not the point. The point is that the Fury Belt's got its application too and is very strong, but I think overall in a general field, Focus Sash is better, especially in the mirror. The Grant was incredible because Grant looping with Marshadow is just backbreaking for an opponent, especially if your draw engine's live. Like, if you have Training Court on board, Grant's just always going off every turn, and then they can't stop Marshadow. So that's another thing to consider. And the 7th Fighting just helps. The last piece I'll touch on, and the reason the Fighting energy came up as well, was in the last bits of testing, there were players we were testing with that were using energy denial. And that was another element I was concerned about. So having the extra fighting energy in general just is a little better. And again, we want to have more ways where we're not as reliant on dogs. So having 7th Fighting makes it easier to get the Blood Moon, just like Evan had mentioned. So all those pieces kind of played into, last minute changes. If I had to go back, like I said, I would likely just play the 60 we were originally on, but I don't have any regrets.
And you bubbled right out. Like, you were right there.
Yeah.
Like 5-1-1, right? Was the record?
Yeah. I finished 5-1-1. My only loss was actually to another fellow Blazer, Lee Hoffman, who we tested a lot with in Dragon, and admittedly, he didn't beat me, I lost. So I'll take that to the grave. But But
Hey,
no,
Gould beat me.
but
I
And
I
Evan was
lost.
also on a winning end. So Evan went 5-2, but 5-1 at the time of his 7th round game. So Evan was right there as well.
I was
yeah,
4-3.
yeah, we had a really strong finish as a team overall. I think I did the win rate, and just from the 5 of us that played, like we had an over 70% win rate overall on the day.
Yeah.
Again, I went undefeated against non-Blazers. I had my 1 loss, and it is what it is about intentionally drawing early in a tournament. Again, I have no regrets on where that lands, but nevertheless, I felt very strong about where the deck was position-wise, and still think the deck stands up. It's a very impressive deck. There is one card that we haven't really talked about yet. I think that I like Ghouls to kind of touch on and why we played it, as well as Logan, who's actually the one that really mentioned like we need to have this in the list, and that's Reset Stamp. I will say myself, I like Reset Stamp, but I've had times where Reset Stamp finds its way in my hand at the start when I need it to be anything else. And again, it was that fear. I was a bit of a coward on it, but I also was sold on it one time when Ghouls and I are playing a mirror match, and I said, how many cards do you have in hand? And I can't remember what the card is. I just said, let's half that. And I played Reset Stamp. And just solely off of a Reset Stamp, just locking you out of the game after I take out, I think it was Reset Stamp Boss to take out Draw Support. And I would realize, okay, this card's backbreaking. And yeah. So anyway, Logan, if you want to take away like where we kind of decided on the Reset Stamp.
Yeah, for sure. So, Reset Stamp was a card that we had already seen be powerful in Ben Morse's run through the Journey Together 1K. I watched him cripple opponents in playing the card to bring them back down to very small hand sizes after, and again, being able to take knockouts in the same turn. It seemed like very early on in testing with fighting in general in our own hands, it was very evident that if you did not have ways to check fighting's hand size, that they were going to run over you. It was not uncommon to see 13 to 15 card hand sizes, and Andrew himself had said it on stream with Spence that fighting doesn't want to play a bunch of hand disruption because they are going to want to build their own large hand. And so my takeaway from that was, okay, if we're not going to be playing cards like Iono, and this is early on, if we're not going to be playing cards like Iono and Marnie and if we're not going to be playing all 3 of those, then we have to have some other way to reset our opponent's hand without giving up our own. And Reset Stamp was just the perfect, answer to that question. Early Reset Stamps against fighting can also be crippling. Fighting, again, builds up this massive hand so quickly that if you can Reset Stamp a fighting player, even if after they've taken their first prize card and you can cut their hand in half, it can buy you turns. So the card itself was just super strong. And what allows us to play, because all of these deck decisions were cumulatively tested and eventually determined by all of us, but there's nothing more that I have to say about the decisions about the power cards. The thing about it is that we are able to play these power cards because of the way that we have been consistently making decks over the last year. And we're not going to play 17 Pokemon in a deck unless we absolutely have to. This is a 9 Pokemon deck. And so that allows us so much more flexibility to throw in these additional power cards into the mix without having to feel like we're disrupting what we're doing. Right? Like Boss, Hex. All these cards are cards that traditionally you may not see in other fighting lists, but we're able to fit them in and comfortably at that.
Yeah, and the last thing, I think you said just about everything you can say about it. Like it's an insanely strong card into the mirror, and just late game against any other deck. And why I value it, like, and I think this is just a really, really important thing to say. And I come from playing a format where we played 4 in every deck. I haven't played Standard since 2017, so I don't know if decks are playing 4 Iono constantly or anything like that. Maybe they are. But to me, there's so many games that are won whenever you have the ability to just step back and, as Core, just played hand disruption. Like, take it out of their hand to be able to win the game, and just put them on the back foot and make them have to draw the resources. There's so many times where people crumble when you gust, KO their draw support, and then play Reset Stamp. Reset Stamp is a card that lets you be a better player than the opponent. Like, that's definitely a card that you can make a massive argument is like a big part of like why I won the tournament. It's like the amount of times I was just able to Reset Stamp. Even early, it was good. Like, if I played against 3 water decks all day. Like, there's a chance for me to have an out if I see that, not every player bolt fixed or something like that. My player or my opponent in round 6 that was on stream with water. He used the Seedra's attack to like fish out 3 Pokemon. Now I did not play Reset Stamp in that moment, but I did have the Iono in hand. But like, if I had Korrina in hand, or if I had Arven in hand, then I also had access to that. And just, again, turning those cards into something that just like, okay, I don't want you to have this, and like, I'm a step out of this as like playing the cards like on the field and like playing as a player. Like, I'm gonna put you in the back foot with this card, and so that's why I value like Reset Stamp. It really is a card that makes a difference. I think that's probably the card that I've gotten questioned on the most as far as like people trying to cut, and I'm just like, I don't think that card's cuttable. I think that card is super, super important, and especially as a fighting deck, like Logan said, we need our large hands, and we can't afford to play in Iono and Marnie. I don't even like playing Marnie in the deck, but like, I'm like, you have to play it. And so I'll be on record saying this. I would rather play Reset Stamp than Marnie, for real. But anyway, that's Reset Stamp. I think it's just a really, really good card. Kind of going through like the last little bit on this list real fast. We did play Compressor when we were playing Lana's Aid as a means to just increase like the ability to like draw our Pokemon and get the energies in the discard pile, so we could play Lana's or Klara to then draw. Like, Battle Compressor, essentially red, like, discard both rocks and energy, and then you get your draw set up, draw 3. It was a great card. It just ultimately didn't meet the cut. It's a card that I really, really value, especially if you do play the Lana's Aid as well. And then just kind of like a little silly tidbit for y'all. A few cards that we did consider Pokemon-wise that we didn't mention before would be the Archeops that blocks the evolutions. And then we actually did a decent amount of testing with Relicanth into Metacham, and being to copy the Metatite's attack for 40 plus our damage buffs, like, and being able to do that twice in a row. It actually was pretty disgusting when it did happen, but again, it was just pretty not worth it. Like, but I figured people would appreciate knowing that we went down that path, and that was a Lee Hoffman suggestion, was the Relicanth. So we kind of mentioned a little bit about all the different versions of the fighting list that we went down, with the regular Knackle, the Machamp, the damage buff, the Hairy Mama, and we kind of talked about like why we settled on what we settled with what we were expecting the meta to be. And with all that in mind, the big thing that I just want to touch on was two things with the headspaces when piloting the deck. The first thing is the energy management. You've heard us talk about drawing forward or like attaching and making sure that you have an energy to attach to begin with. I would say that's probably the biggest skill with the deck, and maybe the hardest thing to figure out, because your initial thought as a player is, I can draw 3. Let me burn this energy, and I'm holding on to energy retrieval, so let me just play the energy retrieval to get back my energy. That sounds fine, but it's not. You have to question why you need to dig. So for me, a lot of my tournament run and just use of the deck, I have a goal of what I'm trying to accomplish. And as my turn starts, or maybe even before that, I'm questioning how much I need to dig with the Solrock and Lunatone. And then can I afford to even not attach an energy this turn? Because sometimes, if you're not trying to route a Okidogi or Marshadow, sometimes I would hold energies. Like I wouldn't even attach them, because I would have my Ting-Lu, I would have my Solrock, and I'd have my card. Or Bloodmoon. Bloodmoon auto attaches the energies. So I would prep the Bloodmoon a lot with the 2 energies down, but then I would hold on to that one. With Training Court, Night Stretcher, Energy Retrieval, and just the Klara and all the that we actually play, I was confident a lot of times in saving those resources that I would have them when I needed them, and it would just be more of like a check and balance kind of system where I'd be like, okay, I sit back, I'm applying the pressure, all my guys are ready to go, they just need an energy, and I'm not in a place where like a hand disruption would screw me over too much, right? Because we have our basic energies, but we do have our special energies. They don't have to just go to Okidogi. And so a lot of times I see people just burn through their resources way too fast. And I think that's a mistake, because if you hold off on the energies, it allows you to say, hey, maybe I can dig this next turn for the needed gust that I need, right? And maybe I'll hit the energy plus the gust. And if you burn the energy ahead of time, you might not see it, because maybe your opponent plays a disruption card. Maybe you've got Iono something, and you top deck into a ball card to like shuffle your deck, where cards that are on the bottom can now come up to the top or something, and you can rearrange your deck. You have higher outs to hit it off of the Lunatone. You know, there's like things that like you really have to think about before just throwing in energy to draw forward.
Yep.
And sometimes you do need to do that. Sometimes you need to just like build up a hand to like have a lot of options. But what I want to encourage you with as you're playing the deck is to like sit back and be like, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I just doing this because I have this ability in play? Take a step back, don't do it. That's probably like the biggest thing is like in digging and not digging, and then even just like attaching and not attaching. In certain matchups, it is really important. Like Evan was saying, like some matchups you have to hit the attachment because you want to be swinging with the Marshadow, right? That's 2 energy. You want to be swinging with the Okidogi, 2 energy. And the only thing to counter that is knowing that you play Raihan. And Raihan is really, really crucial in this whole conversation of energy management. Because sometimes I would set up plays where I'm banking on the opponent not to disrupt my hand, or I'm believing I can see the Raihan off of like dig 3, then some with like Surge, plus like Poke Gear, like if I'm pulling in my hand or something. Like I'm just like playing the odds, and my deck might be thinner or something like that. And it just takes some time of like actually playing, seeing like those scenarios pop up, and saying maybe I got burnt by attaching this energy too soon and not having the draw I need, or I just straight up discarded this energy to draw 3 and I miss my attachment. Sometimes you just got to attach 2 and not worry about draw 3. Like you just have to weigh out your options.
Yeah, and a lot of that just comes down to the repetition of it all. Like, some decks, like, you want to get your reps in, right? Like, and a lot of people overlook that. They see a deck list online and they're like, all right, I'm going on that. I've seen that it can win. And, some of it becomes muscle memory if you've played enough of it, right? It's having not only the headspace of, like, why is this card in the deck, but also what do I remember of, like, situations I've been in with it. Like, you want to be able to have instant callbacks so that it doesn't become like a slow play situation where you're like, oh god, do I attach this? Do I do that? How do I do that? It's reps. It's a lot of reps. And boy, do we get reps in testing between all these different variants. Just the sheer amount of time that went into it.
Yeah, I was like keeping a log of like the games, and I think overall actual games played was like nearing 200. Like there's a lot of games in just the 6 to 8 weeks this came to be. You juggle that with full life and everything too, like that. It's a lot. There's a lot of games of GLC. Because GLC is not a thing where you can pick and play a game in 5 minutes, or at least most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So, there was a lot there. We kind of to piggyback off of what you just mentioned, like the repetition's important. Not playing cards. It's actually something that I had to learn with the deck too, because again, I at first was playing the deck to try to see how explosive I can be, and it's great to get all of these hands, but actually there's something to be said about trying to actually be minimal. Like if you were executing the plan that you want to execute, use as little as possible, because you're saving those resources for later, but more importantly, you are keeping yourself from being vulnerable to hand disruption. And that is one of the weaknesses of the deck. Like you can, if you overextend, you can be soft to disruption. And you can actually minimize that by only sticking to what you have to do. And I think Ghouls, like multiple times on camera, like expertly showed how to do that. I had some games where kind of the same thing. Like I didn't do much more than just I literally had games where, like I had 4 or 5 different outs in hand, but because I didn't need to do anything more until my opponent answered, I just literally dropped the stadium onto play, or they put a stadium down for me, and I just Ting-Lu and pass. Like I didn't do anything. I just said, here, you deal with this first, and then I'll figure out what I got to do next. And again, you're asking someone to outplay you, and I think that's an important skill to learn. I think this deck is actually not easy to just pick up and play. This is a challenging deck to play because you have to understand the fluidity of the deck, and also it's going to challenge you to understand the decks you're playing against. It's not as straightforward, I'm just going to punch hard and fast with fighting. Like sometimes you might have that situation, but understanding what your opponent's playing, what their outs could be to the attack options you have, and ultimately knowing how to sequence that properly not only is a challenge, but also it will make you a better player. So I think it's an encouraging thing to go to as well. The one last thing I wanted to touch on within this this particular topic is you'd mentioned trying to set up Raihan. and I got some eyebrows on this, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there's value in this, and I feel justified because I heard Andrew multiple times mention it on camera. I have come to like the idea of when I have so many other cards in hand and I know what my live outs are, but I can set up a play. I really value playing Arven if I've already set up to play Tool plus Pokegear, or Korrina to set up plus Pokegear, because I can be in a situation where I already know what I'm going to play, but Pokegear actually can set up other outs if I've already drawn through so much of the deck. And this is not obviously like turn one I'm doing this. It's like mid-game where you already know you only have so many outs left in the deck, and you can literally set up a play where, okay, I'm now sitting on this card. You either have to disrupt me, which is fine because I've left minimal amount of cards in hand, or I'm going to find the exact card I need to beat you. And again, it's asking the opponent a question, and they're already being asked to deal with what's on board too. So it's just an additional thing, and sometimes you can even play a mind game with that. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. That's just another way to make your Arven live. Outside of some of the other power cards you might need. So I know, like in testing once, I got an eyebrow raised about that, and I did it. Then immediately used the Pokegear to Raihan, set up an Okidogi out of nowhere that couldn't be answered, and I just won the game off of an Okidogi in a match. So I felt a little vindicated there, but I wanted to bring it up because that's a good example of what Goalies was saying regarding the setups.
Yep, it's a very modal deck, just like Evan had said, so just make sure to try to get your reps in with it if this is a type that you want to pick up and play as like your main GLC deck. You just have to learn the ins and outs of when to switch into which mode, when to hit the gas, and when to take a step back and spread it out. So definitely a fun deck to play, and one that you should start learning your routing for sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, like the overall arching thing I would say about the deck that seems like a big misconception, is Marshadow. I just want to say this for the record that I didn't use Marshadow at all during Swiss. Like, I didn't attach to it, I didn't bench it, and it just so happened to be the card I started with in the finals. But I think people see that, and like they see like how gross it can be, and they build their whole strategy around like autopiloting into a Marshadow suite. And I just want to encourage you not to do that. Like that's the biggest thing I can say about it. It's like, yes, Marshadow is really good and it has insane uses, but please don't look at this as a Marshadow sweep deck. Like that, it's not what it is. Like, it's an option that we have. But anyway,
that came into the deck 3 or 4 days before the tournament, so let that be like known. That's the reason why we definitely are telling you, hey, Marshadow's a thing and it is a tool in this toolbox, but it was not at the forefront of our minds going into this tournament. It pulled heavy weight, and we were able to see the inherent strengths of the Marshadow, but there's going to be games where you definitely do not pull the thing out, for sure.
Yep, for sure. We've already mentioned a good bit about matchups and stuff like that, so if you have any specific questions or anything like that, feel free to just message us on that. I mean, we've talked about the Psychic matchup. I think that's the most controversial thing where I had confidence going into it. I know, Chucky said, there was some difference in testing moments, but I think we crushed Psychic. Water is the same kind of concept where we're just faster, and we can deal with all of their big guys. Colorless is weakness. Grass can be a little tricky, but we have speed. Dragon is really easy with Bloodmoon and Ting-Lu. Control can be a little scary if your name is Eggmill. I think that's really the hardest thing for the deck in the control world. I feel like I say that with every deck that we do a deep dive in. It's Eggmill beats this. Because it is the best deck in format. I'm going to say it. Eggmill's the best. But no,
why didn't you play it to the tournament then, nerd?
because I wanted to prove a different archetype. It's gonna be my answer.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to prove that I'm more than egg mill.
We had to get
But-
that in there because Ghoulies literally the night before the tournament. And I've got to get this in there because I didn't get it in the winners interview. So the night before the tournament, I believe that Ghouls was still locked into Egg Mill, and we played a couple of hours on a specific matchup that he was not, convinced that he was ready to take down, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm playing R.D.T, bro. That's it."
Yeah.
Mine made up.
So to even go further with that, yeah. So like the lore of that night, deciding what to play. I actually have the damage buff Garganackle sleeve. I want to point out to everyone there is a Marshadow deck out there, and I will have it out there eventually. But it literally is just running every damage buff possible. You're running damage buff Knackle. You're running things over. And Ghouls and I sit down and we play a couple games back and forth. And again, how games go, like we're going back and forth. But I think at one point I make a comment and I say, okay, let's play another. If I win, then I'm gonna play this deck. But if you beat me, I'll play R.D.T, and that's that. And we play a game, and there were some surprising situations, whatever. But the point of it is, I ended up winning the game. But Ghouls pointed out something really important as I won it. He's like, "Yeah, but did you need any of that?" Pointing to the package. Like, I literally beat him with the R.D.T pieces. I didn't beat him with any of the other stuff. And I was like, oh, he's right.
Oh,
And I told him, like, hey, I'm in. I'll play the deck if you do. And what he didn't know is I left the room and then panicked and put a bunch of other cards in the deck and ruined it. But
Yeah, you came over into my hotel room and you're like, all
Literally.
right, we need another energy. And I'm like,
it's like,
okay.
hey, Evan, how about we make R.D.T better?
I wouldn't say that. I definitely missed having the reset stamp.
No, for sure. That's why I use the air fingers. Yeah, it was a decision. But again, I still think the deck is incredibly strong, and I still think there is some flexibility with it. But again, especially with where the meta is right now, like this is the 60.
So we've hit matchups, we've hit strategies, we've hit everything that we could possibly go through in terms of what our decisions were with the cards that we decided to play and put in the deck, what we think you can flex out, and what you can mess around with yourself as a pilot and builder. I think the last thing that we want to get to are just a couple of community questions that we've seen pop up over the last couple of weeks from returning. So Ghouls, if you have those and want to maybe go through a couple of them, then we have probably time for that.
Sure. The first one that we have, and sorry I did not actually get the write down the people that actually asked the questions, but if you responded to me, your question's probably here. What is your typical setup order for the Pokemon? And so for that question, we talked about how much it's like a free form deck. Depending on the matchup is like what I will kind of attach to see like if I need to like start checking them. So first things first, if you have access to grabbing the rocks, that's probably what you want to go with. Like, I don't know, I'd probably say like 7 out of 10 times. Like the rocks are always just like number one, consistency, and then like an early game attacker. But I do like going in with Ting-Lu early. Like I like checking them and just being like, hey, do you have an answer? Because a lot of times they don't have answers and you can just win the game right there. Or I'm just gonna say like, what's in my hands? What do I have access to? Like, do I have access to setting up an Okidogi? Is this a matchup where Okidogi is like pretty good into?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like let me just go Okidogi. Like let me just start pushing there. So like I would say like the rocks and like a pressure Pokemon. I mentioned in my match with Brooke, like I had the option to like go into Ting-Lu, but I opted not to attack. This just goes into thinking and like, hey, like where is my energy investment best placed based off of the stand that I have?
Yeah.
that's kind of how I would approach the setup, right? Like pressure Pokemon. If you're going first, I think it's really cool to like search one of your 2 energy guys and like get down and attach to that Pokemon.
The Riolu, I've watched you do that several times.
Yeah, it's a great option to just be like, okay, this needs to evolve, so let me just go ahead and prep this, because all my like the Solrock, the Ting-Lu, they're all 1 energy attachments. I do put Bloodmoon into that category. Like, can the Pokemon be powered up in 1 turn? Absolutely. I 100% hit my opponent in top 4 with a turn 1 Bloodmoon, swinging for 200 damage on their Snorlax. Like, if it's there, it's a good option. 100 damage for turn 1 with 150 HP Pokemon, that's a pressure Pokemon. Like, use it, you know what I'm saying? So that would be what I would say my typical setup order would be.
And this question's probably birthed out of some kind of hand where, and we've seen it, this is not, you know, we're not telling you that you're going to guaranteed have 2 search cards in your opening hand every single game, and that you're going to be able to get the rocks every single game. We've played enough games to know that, you know, there are times where you start 1 search card, and what we have found more often than not is that is where you forego your, okay, I have to get one of the rocks, knowing that I can't get the other one right now. I have no advantage to getting Lunatone out or Solrock out if I can't search out the other one. Putting myself in a position where I'm demanding it the next turn. This is much better to be a little bit more strategic in that sense, and, you know, set up an attacker that can check your opponent if they start going aggressive on your board, or, you know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is birthed out of the concept too. When we test, we don't simply just say let's play games and see what happens. Like, we will intentionally play the matchups we expect to be played, and we will put ourselves on the back foot. Like, and actually, that was one thing I learned playing this deck a lot, is this deck does not mind going first, which is huge in GLC. A lot of decks that live and die off of whether they get to use a supporter turn 1. This deck doesn't mind, and that, I think, does help decide, like, that dictates your decision making. And, you know, if you don't have access to the rocks, there are plenty of times where it's fine. I had plenty of games where I'm able to sit on 2 massive threats like Ting-Lu and Dog and say, answer these first, and then you're going to eventually rely on some form of hand disruption while I've used what I have to set up attacks and give you questions right off the gates. And you're going to give me cards coincidentally because of the nature of how many of these decks are built in that way, right? So I would get the rocks later. I've had so many times too where it's like my board looks like nothing, and then the next turn I have a full board. I have 8 cards in hand, and I'm still hitting, you know, for all the stuff that I want. So there's a lot of I think a lot of it's patience, right? In knowing that, like you said, you have to have the chance to know what your plan is and not use everything. So it's okay, depending on that matchup, to not just throw everything right up against the wall and see what sticks. Like, you're fine just setting up something and saying, here, deal with this first.
Yeah, one of the next questions that we have is Lucario so much better than Terrakion as a follow Botaniker? I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
The fact that it hits at a higher number, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the fact that it hits at a higher number is super relevant against so many decks. Against water, I mean, one of the things that pops up initially that I like going for is I will Hawlucha ping a
Sobble.
Yeah, the Sobble. So that way, if they come up with an Inteleon to attack, because they'll look for like Hex, like KO on a Dogi or something like that, and then you just clearly have the Lucario ready to swing 150, and at that point, it's at the 150 mark. Same thing with Excalibur. Like you can like ping that, drop that down. Against Psychic, it's really, really important. Like being able to just like hit over that resistance when like Giratina's still minus 20, right?
Yep.
I think
minus
so.
20.
Yeah, and that's a really relevant situation, is like being able to come up and bop a Giratina for a KO. So the fact that you have to evolve it was a big deterrent for me at first, but after just seeing it played, and again, you are seeing so many cards a turn, you are going to find the Lucario. I can't tell you.
We had
legitimately can't
Korrina and Ultra Ball to search it out. I'm just looking back at the list. I think we literally have 2 options to search the thing out.
Raihan.
Yeah.
I can't tell you one time where I've needed to find the Lucario and I've just been like, I can't respond to you.
Yep.
It does not happen. Like it's just because you can sequence it to be that way, right? Like you can set up your responses, or like maybe you shift into a Ting-Lu at a different point, that Lucario will get there. And again, it's not a bad starter either. Like that's one of my biggest things. We're talking about pressure. If you start the Terrakion, that combined with Bloodmoon is another hard Pokemon to get out of the active spot. So that's my arguments for it. I do like Terrakion as a Pokemon better than Lucario, but that's just me. But that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about that in the actual conversations about the deck choices.
Yep. The next question that we have then is, what are the flex spots and how do you deal with the water matchup? So flex spots, this is something where I'm like super tight on it because I feel like the list is perfect. I would tell you that there are no flex spots. But I mean, yeah, it's just a hard question. I think that y'all have a little bit more of an opinion on that. Maybe Battle VIP. That's the first card that comes to mind. And then Marshadow. I would say Marshadow probably, believe it or not. I think Marshadow is probably the most cuttable most cuttable thing, because it is the card that came into the list very last, and it didn't feel like it was a massive enhancer, but I don't think it was like the thing that just made the deck feel broken. It obviously showed up big time in the tournament. But I think I still would have won regardless of that. So, I mean, needless to say, I would probably say Battle VIP and Marshadow, if anything. But, I don't know, what are y'all thoughts?
I mean, I agree. You know, the extra energy was nice, but it wasn't like game breaking in our list. Definitely regret cutting Reset Stamp. I feel bad about that one. But like in the moment, it was like, you know, you get so close to an event and you're like, okay, what feels the safest? And sometimes you got to risk it a little more. And yeah, the Marshadow could probably go. I used it once in like my entire run, and it was good. It's just compared to like other attackers you can be setting up for the same amount of energy. I don't know. Maybe another recursion could be better. You know, maybe another way to pick Pokemon up. Something. Who knows? But I know Marshadow's fun. Could go.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I felt like there I mean, again, this is coming from like testing a lot of different things, and I think like fundamentally you're doing different things with other versions of these fighting lists that were tested. Um, yeah, I think Battle VIP is definitely on the fringe of if you're looking at a cuttable card. I think a lot of it then just comes down to what are you trying to play against or beat. Um, Again, I still think Reset Sim's a very strong card, so I'm not. I don't think it's going against that. I think that especially if I'm expecting the mirror a lot, it's really good. What I had found in the matchups at least that I had was that Reset Stamp wouldn't have. I was either so far ahead that Reset Stamp wasn't needed, or the matchups where it was a little tighter. My opponents were hand disrupting so often already and kind of hamstringing their own hand that it didn't matter that I had it. But like specifically in the scenario of I'm behind, I need to catch up. Reset Stamp is really important. But I think it comes also down to like preference on how you play. If you're someone that wants to rely more on the more proactive side as opposed to controlling, then you can do that. But as you mentioned before, like you weren't sure what Standard's recently doing, but I mean, I had played Standard even as recently as a year ago, and the number of times I won playing unfair Stamp, very high. So, yeah, I think that Reset Stamp is still incredibly strong, but I think people can make arguments if they feel like there's a better card to play. If someone wants to try it, but I think you might be doing yourself a disservice if you're sitting across from another fighting deck or R.D.T deck. That said, yeah, I don't know. The Marshadow is kind of tough because it does shine. I think the way to really summarize the Marshadow is it's as good as the things around it that make it work. Because if you don't play all the damage mods, that's why we overlooked it for a long time. But when you look at having all the summation of damage mods already there, it's a very good option. And again, in some of the older lists when we were playing, when I say we, I mean Evan and I, like Terrakion was in that slot. So we actually were playing both at one point to have like these series of revenge attackers and recurring. But we found that the Marshadow was so much stronger in that same spot because of the damage mods. So that said, though, yeah, I do think you could, especially with the Ting-Lu version, like you could cut it. So, but that's really it. I don't know if you want to touch back on. They asked, I think, the second part of that question was about how to beat water.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say like it's like a matchup that you can kind of rush down. Hex is fantastic in the matchup. They'll probably play Bench Bearer from now on. Hopefully for them, they will. But I feel like people just don't learn. They don't learn. So if they're playing the Manaphy, then that's okay. Like you can just gust it down, kill it, and then switch into Ting-Lu. You have plenty of turns to like board wipe them with Ting-Lu. Rough Seas is like low key, like a little annoying, but it's not game ending. You just discard it like after reoccurring the Ting-Lu if they wipe it out. Again, be smart with your numbers, set up the math to knock out their support, and just know that you can kill the whale basically whenever you want. It's big. Just don't get overwhelmed by it. Like keep on focusing, I think, on their support, and you will come out ahead just based off of prisory speed. If they happen to burn their blower, I mean the sash is great. Yeah. They do have to get 5 energies on the Doki, like to hit the 5 energies on the whale to get through the Doki, which through like hand disruption and stuff like that it can be tricky at some points. But Bloodmoon is really good at killing the whale once you set up the math with the Lu and Hawlucha. That's kind of my take on the water matchup. It can be tough if they get like a fast whale going and can reoccur it, but you're just way faster than they are, typically.
Not everybody's playing Milo Pump, right?
Yeah, no, not until people get smart and start playing Milo Pump. The last question is, how do you beat R.D.T? And I said earlier, play Eggmill. That's
Yeah.
your best chance. No, I mean the deck. The strong thing that it has going for it is it's really positive matchup spread. It's really solid. Hand disruption plus knocking out draw support is always really good. That's kind of like generic. You have to obviously play reset stamp and cards like that, or hope that they're attacking with the Solrock at that point. But there's really not too much. Like people will say like Enhanced Hammer or something like that, but I don't think that really slows us down too much. There's ways for us to play around that. But yeah, I don't think that there's like a massive you do X, Y, and Z and this beats this deck. Like the deck just beats you.
Right.
So anyway, like legitimately, Eggmill just beats the snot out of this deck. So I got lucky and avoiding Winnow in top 8. But item lock's still not really tough for it. Like what's tough is that confusion that the Venomoth does. That can be a little obnoxious. Plus like hitting for weakness. So like
Yeah.
60 plus confusion. Like that's what's kind of screws you up. But yeah, that's what comes to mind to answer that question.
Yeah, I want to touch on that though, because it's happened many times in our testing. Even in your weakest matchup, or weakest matchups, or whatever you want to look at it, like Eggmill's still a setup deck, and if you go second, you have dunk potential in this deck. It's like it's something we never we touched on it because we talk about Solrock, but really this deck can dunk, and sometimes Eggmill is not going to have, or Grass, or any of those decks are not going to have the way to do anything on their first turn. They're relying on a supporter because that's the nature of GLC. So even in those matchups, you can still win, but you shouldn't really steal on paper because you just turn 1 Solrock plus Guzma Hala, let's go, and you just take whatever KO you need to. The deck is just so aggressive. And it attacks from different angles. It's very hard to pin down one specific thing that beats it because you just have 2 other ways you attack. So, it's like you said before, you can answer X and Y, but it's hard to answer X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, we built this monstrosity to kind of check a lot of things. Checks a lot of boxes. So in order to beat it, now it's, that's the big question that's coming out of this tournament and weekend is R.D.T is posting a lot of results right now, and there has to be some strategy that does beat it. I'm of the mindset that you gotta outbig it. You have to outnumber the Pokemon and being able to sustain. Ghouls has already touched on it, but if you can't get a whale to stick, you're pretty much doomed against this thing, because if they can respond to your whale, they can respond to just about anything. So it's definitely a tough deck to play against. But at the same time, we've said this a couple of times throughout the night, it's not the easiest deck to pilot either. So there are going to be times where you sit down to play against this thing and it's not one of us on the other end of it. You may be fine. We touched on the fact that some players are, and we're getting a lot of questions about the Marshadow almost daily because people are wondering how it functions in the deck, thinking that it is, a massive part of the strategy. So you're always going to have people that you are going to inherently be better than, as long as you're practicing your deck, getting reps into it. And I think that in Gym Leader Challenge, knowledge is everything. So that's probably the best way to beat any deck, is to understand what it's trying to do to you. And then with R.D.T, I think there's times where you have to make guesses against it. You're going to have to guess that X, Y, or Z is coming next, and you're going to have to be correct. Because the deck is so modal, that I've said that a couple of times tonight, that it can just pivot its strategy at any given moment. And you have to try to pin down what your opposing player is trying to do to you.
It has a lot of options because it can be a spread deck, it can be a donk deck, it can be a wall between Dogi and Marshadow. So it's like recognizing what your opponent is like setting up for, you know, like trying to kind of like choreograph that, like, okay, they're attaching to that, you know, they're looking at this, like it's a lot of knowing what the deck is capable of on top of like your own reps. Like Logan was saying, like if you're really good at your own deck, you're going to have a much better shot against a deck that can do so many things just because you know your outs.
Yeah, anecdotal, but I've won 0 games against Fairy Spread, so that might be the new tech.
Well, guys, with that, I think that is a perfect spot to put a bow on this deep deck dive. We've answered some of your questions, and again, we've been through the headspace with all of the decisions leading up to the Akron Mega Evolutions 3K. Before we get out of here, one more time, we want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our partners over at Collectors Connection. You can, again, check out their website at collectorsconnectionduluth.com. Check out their events that they have going on for all their TCG card sports. They are an awesome venue and place to get involved if you are in that Duluth, Minnesota area. So huge thank you to them. Thank you to Ghouls, Evan, and Chucky for participating in the festivities tonight. We hope that you guys have had fun along with us on this deep deck dive. And, you know, shout out to everyone that has contributed to this awesome deck and concept that we put together. And one more time from the team, guys, thank you all for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you on the next one.